guy looks familiar to me. I've been studying it, and I remember that he used to wash dishes at the Heartland Cafe back in 1976.
And many years ago.
That was a great start to a great career. He is now the renowned mystery writer Sam Reaves. Good morning to you, Sam.
Good morning, Michael and Tom, and thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here in a place where I happily misspent much of my misspent youth.
Yes.
Right in this very room when it was Roy's.
It was good thing the prices were cheap, though.
Oh man, I can't tell you how much money I spent in this joint.
Well, I was up in the YMCA not too long ago, and you and I run into each other there at the McGaw Y, and I said, how about you coming on the radio show? And you said, what for? I said, well, because you're a famed writer now, and you've written even about the Heartland and some characters that you met here. And then you went on to tell me about a book called Cold Black Earth. And you actually gave me a hint about a serial killer. And I gotta say, I was more nervous, scared, uptight reading it late at night than most books, probably because you told me about this serial killer.
Well, it's a scary book. A friend of mine read it recently and said it was way too scary. I don't generally do that. I've written 12 crime novels. My 13th book is coming out early next year. Normally I've done Chicago-based cops and mobsters stuff, police novels. I did 4 novels set in Rogers Park, actually, featuring a kind of hard-boiled amateur sleuth who was a Chicago taxi driver who kept getting involved in murder investigations. I didn't plan a series. I wrote it as a standalone. Chicago cab driver gets involved in a murder investigation. And when my agent sold the book, the publisher said, can you make this a series? And I said, well, sure, of course. What are you going to say at that point? So I wound up writing 4 books about this guy. And then
Netflix, here he comes.
Yeah, that would be nice. And then I got interested in the outfit. I got interested in organized crime and its deep connections to political corruption in the city of Chicago, a famously corrupt city from the start. So I then did several books, cops and mobster books, involving organized crime in Chicago.
Well, Homicide 69 is the tome that I read, and I read it from beginning to end as a regular mystery writer. And I was intrigued, set to 69, with this interplay between well, there was a main cop protagonist who just keeps going after the mob even after his bosses have given up on it because, of course, it's the mob and you can't change things. And so there was definitely echo to today, though the characters have changed. But how did police procedurals in that case become, for you, a platform to talk about Chicago life in the world?
Well, I've always been interested in my own reading. I've always been interested by books with a strong sense of place. I love books with a strong setting, interesting setting. My books have been described as very character-driven because I'm very interested in people. So I generally, when I plan a book, I start out with an idea of a character and a setting. I get interested in a person and where he or she lives and what happens. So for that book, Homicide 69, I actually wrote it as a prequel to a book that I published in 2002 called Dooley's Back, which again I wrote as a standalone, never intending it to be a series. Dooley's Back is it's set in the late 90s, around the turn of the millennium. And it's about an ex-Chicago cop named Frank Dooley who comes back to Chicago after 8 years in Mexico, where he had to run after getting in trouble, and he comes back and deals with the mess left by his exit from Chicago. In that book, I gave Frank Dooley a whole family. It was the first time I'd ever done that. I'd always written about alienated owners before that. Well, I gave Frank a whole family. I gave him father, mother, brother, and sisters, a Northwest Side Irish-American Chicago cop family. And they appear in the book, except for the father who's deceased in that book. Then I got the idea for a book set in the summer of 1969. I got the idea in about 1999 when all of the anniversaries started popping up in the paper,
Yeah.
on this day in history. And well, on this day in history in 1969, the Woodstock Festival happened. On this day in history, the moon landing happened. On this day in history, the Manson murders happened.
It was an interesting year.
And
Hell of a year.
I started remembering how crazy that whole summer was, the
Yep.
summer of 1969.
Yep.
I was 15 years old. I was just starting to pay attention to what was going on in the world. Brian Jones drowned, Rolling Stones. And I remembered all the crazy stuff that happened. I thought, what an interesting time it would be to set that book. So I started going back and researching it. Went to the Northwestern University Library and spent a couple months just going through the papers from that summer, taking notes. And I plotted out a police procedural involving a murder that originally just looks like a sex killing, but winds up being connected to the outfit, because the victim was the mobster's girlfriend. To do the police procedural stuff, I went through some contacts. I knew a number of police officers, and I was put in touch with a guy that turned out to be the best consultant a Mr. Writer could ever have. A retired Chicago police detective named John DiMaggio. And he worked with
He has the right name.
Yes, completely straight, honest cop. Absolutely unblemished reputation, which, as we know, you can't always say that about a Chicago police officer, sadly. But anyway, John had been a homicide detective in that era, and he helped me write the book, made sure all the police stuff was accurate, critiqued the chapters that I wrote them. So the police stuff in that novel was very solid. The publisher described it to me as one of the best half-dozen police procedurals he'd ever read. But it's also just a novel about a man in his time. It's a novel about a guy. He's a police officer. He has a son in the Marines in Vietnam and a son at home. And his world is being turned upside down. The culture is being turned upside down. We all remember what a turbulent time that was. It was the high water mark of the Vietnam War and the protests. It was the high water mark of outfit influence in Chicago politics. So that's what that book is about.
Sam Reaves, a couple of questions. Where did you grow up, and who are some of your favorite writers, mystery writers or otherwise?
Okay, I grew up in little Midwestern towns in Indiana and Illinois. We moved a couple times. I came to Chicago after college and I've been here ever since. I've lived in Chicago since 1975. So I consider myself a Chicagoan now. My favorite writers, gosh, I have a lot of favorite writers. I always blank when I'm asked that question, starting with, I grew up in a house full of mysteries because my father, who was a theoretical physicist, his favorite recreational reading was mysteries. And he had a collection of the old pocketbook paperbacks from the 40s with the lurid covers. He had studied in England in the 50s, and so he had a lot of the old green penguins. So I grew up reading some of the English writers. Marjorie Allingham was a favorite. American writer Raymond Chandler. Contemporary writers, again, lots of favorites. Actually, recently I really like Gillian Flynn. Reading more so Dark Places, which I thought was one of the perfect novels. Gosh, lots of good.
Now, are your kids into mystery writing or some kind of physics?
I have two really smart kids. They must get it from their mother. That's all I can
That's
say.
what all the guys say.
My son just got his PhD in mathematics from the University of Chicago, and he's off to Harvard in a couple of weeks to do a postdoc. My daughter's in evolutionary biology, getting her doctorate at LSU in Baton Rouge.
Are you going to weave some of their experiences into some of your stories?
Oh, I already have. They served as consultants for me on a book I just finished, which will come out early next year, called Running in the Dark, which is set in a small town in Indiana, strangely modeled on my hometown. Everything fictionalized, but involving a young woman from New York, a mathematician who is hired to teach at a small liberal arts college in a little Indiana town. Is a bit skeptical about having to go live in this tiny town, and on her second day in town happens across a grisly murder. So that's what that one's about. As for Full Black Earth, the book you mentioned, that is set in farm country in western Illinois.
I know, I got to go out to Rock Island soon, and I'm a little leery about driving over the trucks. I mean, really. It's like when I saw Psycho and I thought I was going to be on the same road when I went to California. Boy, was I untight.
Well, I'll tell you how the idea for that book, Cold Black Earth, came to me. I have a brother who lives down there near Galesburg. He lives out in the country near Galesburg. He's a retired policeman. Was a cop in Galesburg for many years. I was down visiting him a few years ago. It was late in the fall, early in the winter maybe. Anyway, it was cold. And I just stepped outside the back door just before going to bed one night, just for a breath of fresh air and to look at the beautiful night sky, which we forget about living here in the city. I was standing out there, and of course in cold air, sound travels a long way. So I was just standing there listening to all the noises from all across the countryside. Motorcycle, very far away, the hog feeders clanking, and you could hear the murmur of traffic on the interstate a few miles away. And I stood out there thinking, what if you heard something really sinister?
Waiting to read the book.
Like, what if you were standing out here at night and you heard a chainsaw going somewhere? And that's where the idea for the book came.
Well, I can't wait to read another one of your books.
Well, Sam Reaves, I appreciate your coming here to talk a little bit about your craft, and I think we do need to bring you back when the next book comes out to talk a little bit more, because I still have more questions to a mystery writer.
I'll be happy to come back.
And I'll see you at the YMCA, brother.
Excellent. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. You're listening to Live from